Hi, I'm Melanie Bunn. I'm a registered nurse, a nurse consultant, and a dementia training specialist. And I was invited to be here by Dementia Alliance of North Carolina to start off February with a talk about intimacy. Now, don't worry, we're not talking about sex. There's another whole session about sex. We are going to be talking about physical closeness and touch, and we are going to be talking about those emotional connections and reciprocity, and we are going to be talking about having that spiritual connection, but we're not going to be talking about the sexuality. Find the next one, that'll talk more about that. So let's start by talking about that idea of physical closeness and touch. So if you look at this photograph has two people, two couples, four people, and if you look at those two couples, you can tell right away the difference in closeness and touch and intimacy. The couple that are closest to us are touching a very vulnerable part of the body, this arm. You know, they're looking into each other's eyes. There's definitely that physical closeness. There's that touch. There's that intimacy of the eyes. The couple that was inside of, they're all about that movie. They're watching that movie. It must be a great movie. I wish I knew which movie it was because they're both adorable. And if they're not paying attention to each other, it must be a great movie. Or there's not that same connection with them. So we're talking about this physical closeness and touch. We're talking about a basic human need. We have a basic human need to have physical touch. And so if you look at these photographs, three people and three couples again, three couples, and there's a level of intimacy between each of them. They're sharing something that they're looking at together. They're holding each other or they're looking at their hands together. There's this true physical intimacy and touch that is shared between the two of them. But it's not only about couples. We all need physical touch, whether we're infants or whether we're children or whether we're older people or whether we're just human beings. We need physical touch from a partner, from a parent, from a friend, from a human being we feel connected to. Now, we as human beings have different kinds of needs because some of us, I'm from Eastern North Carolina, and we have an expression, I'll waller all over you. Some of us really like to be cut. There's not enough touch, and COVID has been hard to be separate and not even to be able to hold hands. It's been really distressing. Other people are really fine with not so much of that. You know, that's fine over there. Shake hands, I'm good for a while. We have different needs physically. We have different senses of personal space. Some of us are really comfortable with the person standing in line behind us being able to feel their breath on our back. That doesn't bother us. Other of us would really butt bump that person. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but you better get out of my way. So that sense of where is your personal space. But generally speaking, personal space are things that are from the bottom of where my hands can touch up to the top of my head. And it goes around my body that way. So this area is considered to be personal space. Now within that area, there are things that are more intimate, more personal, less intimate, less personal. So I will shake hands with just about anybody. I'll shake hands with just about anybody because when I'm shaking hands with that person, they're still in their own space and I'm still in my own space because their body is actually still in public space. Our hands are in personal space, but I've got intimate space all to myself. When this hand starts to come around my shoulder, now there's a little bit of a difference because now this hand is now in my intimate space, and in my intimate space in a really particularly vulnerable, important kind of our faces. So the touching of someone's face is really intimate. The touching of someone's face is really intimate. We touch the faces of newborns, and you'll see mothers touching the faces of their babies, and you'll see children patting each other's faces and touching faces. It's a way of being connected if it's mutual. So sometimes if that person living with dementia is feeling more affectionate, more touching, doesn't have that same sense of personal space that the person who's partnering with them, that can begin to feel uncomfortable. Even if it's not sexual, it can begin to feel uncomfortable. So what can we do to build that connection? What can we do to keep that relationship as a basic human need to be touched and to be held? A couple of things might be interesting. So I love lotion, and I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people love, like I do, these scented lotions. So I can, with my partner or the person I'm partnering with, I can use this lotion and I can rub the person's hand with it, and I can give them a nice hand massage as a way of really building that touch, building that connection, building relationship that might be more comfortable for me than if it gets into parts of my body that I'm not so comfortable with people touching. So that idea of it's not no touch, it's where touch. Now, I'm a nurse, and there are things I can get away with as a nurse that most people can't get away with. When we start to talk about parts of the body that people can touch, and I'm not talking about breast and genitalia, I'm not talking about those parts of the body. I'm really talking about parts of the body that just are mine and not open to the world in all situations. And one of it is this wrist area. This is a very sensitive, very private, personal part of the body. Now, I can touch it because I, as a nurse, am often taking pulses. So I can touch it for that reason. I can get away with doing that kind of thing. But for somebody else to touch it, if you just touch your own wrist, it feels different than the back of your hand does. So thinking about what parts of the body, or the palm of your hand would be a better example, what parts of the body are we used to exploring the world with? And those are the parts of the body that generally we're really comfortable with touch. So what else can we do to kind of create some of the physical intimacy? Things like walking together or having music on, and so we're dancing together, can connect this physical movement, this physical touch, this moving together with music can really connect us in ways that are really beautiful and helpful, and meeting some needs. So walking together and dancing together and singing together can all bring part of that in. With dementia, these kinds of physical needs might change. It might be the person loses some of their skill with some of this touch while holding on to this strength of touch. So it might be I reach for my person's hand and I grab a hold of it so hard that I actually might hurt this person's hand. I actually grab a hold of it so hard that I'm squeezing, and it's not that I want to hurt or that I'm trying to hurt. It's just simply the way that person's brain is working. They've got strength when they don't have skill. So a simple thing to do is, before they get you like this, is to take that handshake and move into that hand under hand. So now I've got that person's hand from the shake into the butterfly. Now what they're squeezing, when they squeeze really, really hard, if I'm the person living with dementia, my hand would be on top. If I squeeze really, really hard, what I'm squeezing is this soft tissue, not all these bones and nerves and things that can get really uncomfortable. So kind of having some sense of how that touching might be going. Another thing to really talk about is that emotional reciprocity, is how do we need that connection. We all need that connection. Now, some of us can be connected with anybody at a bus station or anybody on the plane. We are on the plane. We are, before we get off, we've exchanged contact information. We're best friends. Some of us need a little bit more to get to that level of intimacy. The challenge with dementia can be that care partner may need a different kind of emotional intimacy, that reciprocity, than that person living with dementia can provide. So we go back to this part of the brain. Let's talk about a part of the brain. We think about this part of the brain. And part of what's changing in this part of the brain is that ability to, this person's perspective and my perspective is to be able to hook those together and really see it from the perspective of our partner. See it from the perspective of the person who's trying to help us. See it from the perspective of the person who needs the help. With dementia, that ability to see it from that other person's perspective disconnects, and so what we often wind up doing is this. So that emotional intimacy of that person who, this is my parent, who when I was a child always put my needs first. This is my parent who loved the grandchildren deeply, and now that grandparent loses some of that. So that grandparent goes up to and orders ice cream for themselves and brings it back and eats it in front of the grandchildren without meeting their needs as well. That's not being very emotionally aware, reciprocal, responsive. Part of dementia is people lose that, or it changes. And it's not that they're intentionally being selfish, it's that their brain doesn't get other people's perspectives that way. So what can the person living with dementia offer? They can offer some of that if we do it in a different way. So maybe instead of expecting that person to give me the affirmations that I need, expecting that person to say, thank you for your sacrifice, thank you for putting your job to the side, thank you for taking care of me, for helping me, or you look really stressed, what's going on, or do you want to talk about it, or how are you feeling? Instead of expecting that person to be able to initiate that, maybe we find other ways to make it happen. And maybe we do that through I remembers. I remember when I was a little girl and I would have a hard day, you would always say, Melanie, let's go take a walk. And so maybe you're having a hard day and you look at your parent and you say, Mom, I'm having a hard day. Let's go take a walk. So you can get that piece of that emotional need met with that relationship, with that person living with dementia. And spiritual connection. Well, we're all spiritual beings. We all need, whether it's from a religious perspective or whether it's from a spiritual perspective or both, we still have these needs to have meaning in life and have awareness of where does where do we get that connection? Where do we get that meaning? Where do we get that sense of this is what keeps me safe? This is what makes the world a safe place for me. For people, we all have different approaches to that, different needs to that. Some of us, it's an individual kind of thing. Some of us find that best through group experiences. For people living with dementia, often there are changes because often things that are newer in their spiritual development move back. And so some of those older beliefs and values may start to come forward. And so it may seem more familiar or less familiar with that person living with dementia, finding that way to connect over a moment, over an image, over music, looking at a songbook and singing a hymn together and praying together or being in a beautiful place together can help make that spiritual connection and support that spiritual need of that person living with dementia. So using some visual cues, you've got some pictures here of some things that might trigger spiritual moments, spiritual discussions, spiritual feelings for the person living with dementia or with you with them in partnership. So, what it comes down to when we're thinking about this need of intimacy, physical, emotional, spiritual, what can we and what can't we change? So, if you look at this image with these three circles, you've got the person living with dementia, you've got us as care partners, and you've got the environment. Well, I've been doing this for a while. I have gotten thousands of phone calls. And what I have found in most of my thousands of phone calls, if you look at this image, this is what people want to change. They want me to change the person living with dementia. Guess who I cannot change? The person living with dementia. So we want it to be about changing that person living with dementia, but they're in brain change. They're doing the best they can. The chemicals might fluctuate, but it's not in a predictable kind of way. So their brain is literally shrinking. It's not going to work the same. So that's not where the change is going to come from. The change might come with changing the environment. So let's look at some images of tables. If you look at these two tables, if I want my person living with dementia to be close to me, if I want them to be physically close to me because I want to be able to eat off their plate, I want them to be able to eat off my plate, I want us to be physically connected, I might choose that round table because I can scoot that chair right up next to them. I can be there close. We can hold hands under the table and eat with our dominant hand. We can do lots of things. If I want that person to eat their own food and leave my food alone, that square table might be a better choice. I'm not saying go buy square tables. It'll work. We can try some other things. We can try separating space with placemats. We can find other ways of keeping mine and yours separate as a part of being intimate or not being intimate in this particular situation. But that square table does define what's mine and what's yours a little better. If you look at these comics of couches or chairs or furniture, if you look at that couch, we see that couch, the tendency is going to be to snuggle on that couch. It looks soft. It looks like it's comfy. What I want is I want my partner to be with me. I want my partner to be close. That couch might be a better choice than those chairs, which kind of define mine and yours. You sit here, I sit here. We can be together. We can watch TV. We can listen to music. We can have a conversation. And you've got your space. I've got my space. So we can work with and change the environment. The other thing we can work with and change is us and our approaches. What are we doing to support and promote intimacy? And what are we doing to support and promote our own need for distance from some of that intimacy? So with connecting physically, if you look at these two images, you see a couple walking together, and you see so many beautiful, close image moments. You know, they're looking at each other. Notice some other things about them. They're on the same foot as they're walking. They're using the same hand for the cane. You can look at this image and think, these are people who've been together and they are going to stay together. And you look at the image of the woman walking alone, and some of y'all are going, oh, that's sad. I don't like that. And some of y'all are going, Lord, I wish I just had a moment to myself. If I could just walk down the street by myself, I would celebrate forever. So some of that intimacy is needing time together and needing time apart to find that, to support yourself in what you need to make yourself and to meet the needs of the person living with dementia, whether it's an individual in a family or whether it's in a care community type of situation. How do we make the connection to get that support that we need? We can do some of that by something called nexting. And nexting is, if I do this, the next thing that automatically happens is this. Nexting is a wonderful strategy to use. So I mentioned a few minutes ago, one of the things my mom used to do to take care of me was we would go for a walk. It's not really what my mom would do to take care of me, but let's say it was. So now when we going out there for a walk and my mom's got dementia, the next thing is to have that conversation. Well, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? So it's a natural kind of automatic kind of thing. Consider some things like filling in the blanks. Um, and that might be something like, Mom, I love you. You love. And Mom might say, well, you. Mom might say cookies, but she might say me. And it's a way of kind of giving that opportunity for that I love you, you love me, that kind of reciprocity there. And then using some of those visual cues like we talked about in the environment, using some photographs of our wedding, using us doing something when I was a child, use some photographs of moments in the person's life that were moments where they were spiritually uplifted. And that can happen in all kinds of situations. So the last thing I want to talk about is the idea of when you don't get what you need from the person living with dementia. And I'm mostly in this part talking about families. When you aren't getting what you need from your family, where can you get that need met? Well, I'm going to start by saying, really think about what you can realistically expect from that person living with dementia. For most people living with dementia, at a certain point, that ability to see it from your perspective, to provide that initiating support isn't going to be a reasonable expectation. So be reasonable in what you can expect from the person living with dementia to limit the disappointment and to help you be able to build a different connection, a different relationship. And then step back and think, what are you not getting? Is what you're not getting touch? Is what you're not getting attention? Is what you're not getting a sense of connection socially or emotionally, or a sense of having somebody on my side? Because that's a human need. That's not selfish. I need, as a human being, to have people who get me, who are on my side. Maybe what I need is to have somebody listen to me, not to fix it, and not to one-up me, but just to hear my stories and to hear my concerns and to hear my joys and my celebrations and to be with me that way. And maybe what you're missing is that sense of being cared for, that sense that somebody is taking care of me. Again, not selfish, it's another human being kind of need. Who can help? Maybe you reach out to family, remembering that not all families can help either. Maybe you reach out to friends, remembering not all friends are there for the same type of help. Maybe you reach out to clergy for that kind of support. Remembering that it's really hard to ask, but there are people out there who are willing to help. And one of the places you can reach out to for either support or attention or to someone to be on your side, or maybe even some days, depending on how things are going, a hug, are my colleagues at Dementia Alliance of North Carolina. So reach out when you need that connection and that intimacy, or for strategies and support in figuring out how to build that in your current relationships with your person living with dementia. Thank you so much for joining me with this Mondays with Melanie, and I look forward to seeing you on other videos.